Dr. Locana is the current chairman of the International Expert Committee of the Inter-Academy Partnership Trieste, Italy, on Third World Urbanization. He is a fellow and past president of the National Academy of Sciences in Sri Lanka, past general president of the Sri Lanka Association for the Advancement of Science, honorary fellow and past president of the Institute of Town Planners in Sri Lanka. He is an honorary fellow and past president of the Sri Lanka Institute of Architects. Over to you, Dr. Locana, to speak on cities without slums.
Thank you, Lolita. My title is Cities Without Slums. Now, our indigenous political leadership, starting from the Donamo era in 1931, concerned themselves more with agriculture and food production for domestic consumption. Emphasis also required voluntary transmigration of landless peasantry from the overpopulated rural wet zone to the dry zone, and river basin development for irrigated agriculture, and later also hydropower generation. Efforts were also made by our early political leadership to improve the appalling health conditions, health and education standards in rural areas that existed under the colonial rule. We thus had a relatively long history of seeing national progress as being synonymous with rural development. Furthermore, Colombo and its linked system of towns, which the British developed for military and revenue collection purposes, were viewed by our rural population perhaps necessary but alien, and the repositories of alien values. That is how the rural folk at that time viewed them. It is therefore not surprising that urban development received very little priority under our early political. We see now a different attitude towards urban development. Ministries dedicated to the subject in different areas, the substantial recent statutory amendments to enable an integrated spatial planning policy at the highest national level, and qualitative goals being enunciated for the future. These latter, 2007, provide a changed new context. The uneven distribution of urban places in the national landscape and the primacy of Colombo in relation to other existing towns are two remarkable deformities which, when seen and recognized, lay out for remedial action.
She came. මෙයා ආවද? නෑ මේ අර ප්‍රසන්ටේෂන් එකේ පොඩි මෙයාට ෆෝටෝ තැන්ක්ස් වල පොඩි චේන්ජස් වුණා.
Sorry for the interruption. This map of Sri Lanka, this boundary that is shown here is the boundary between the wet zone and the dry zone. Smaller area is the. Now, if you see these dots, the dots are towns, cities and towns, and you will see that they are focused on the wet. If you the dry zone. Now, the primacy of Colombo. Now, this is a graph indicating the size of Colombo in terms of population in relation to the other towns. Now, when this is so marked, that is called primacy. Two remarkable deformities which we have, like focus on the dry zone, on the wet zone, and the population situation in these towns, primacy of Colombo. The latter is, of course, a well-known phenomenon, that is primacy, common to many small agrarian third world countries have undergone colonial suppression. I mean, that is a fact. Practically all the smaller countries that have undergone colonial suppression have this element of primacy. Now to talk about slums and shanties. We in Sri Lanka make a distinction between slums and shanties. Buildings which may originally have been constructed well have since fallen into disrepair and decay and are occupied by the poorer and disadvantaged segments of the urban population are referred to. The term shanties, on the other hand, is reserved for makeshift buildings of salvage material which are often not in conformity with urban building codes and standards. Slums are found in the cities of both the industrialized and the developing countries. Shanties are a third world phenomenon, where squatter communities. A slum dweller is usually a tenant, while a squatter or shanty dweller is usually an owner builder, but occupying somebody else's land. The term slums is used here in this presentation to cover both shanties and convenience and the built form of a city reflects its economic, social, and cultural conditions. There are wide disparities in economic and social conditions in a city, for example, between the rich and the poor. These disparities will be clearly evident in the city's built form. It is the reason why slums and ghettos are seen in the cities of even the richest countries. It is why squatter settlements are found in the urban areas of the third world. Now, the complete eradication of slums from the face of any city is impossible as long as a marked income differentials exist among the inhabitants within that. Therefore, merely altering the built form of a city in its architectural and urban design aspects will not by itself be a solution. Most squatter settlements in third world cities originate with migrants from the rural hinterlands, that is, rural urban migration. Very high rates of rural urban migration have been recorded in many developing countries, immense problems as well as challenges in those countries. In fact, third world urbanization is seen as one of the major challenges for mankind in the century of the new millennium. The most dramatic changes appear to be taking place in Asia. This continent was 80% rural just 5 decades ago, 50 years ago. Asian countries alone now contain more than a staggering 50 megacities, that is, cities of over 10 million people each. This is not a matter of pride for Asians, because these cities could well be the darkest hellholes of misery, squalor, and disease that mankind has yet witnessed. We should be reminded by our current experience of the COVID-19 pandemic. Urban slum conditions accentuate the possibility of the spread of dangerous disease. A special peculiarity of Sri Lanka was the fact that there had been little rural-urban migration in our early period of self-government in 1931. The reason for this, obviously to do with our past emphasis on agricultural production, coupled with a great push to improve health and education facilities for the underprivileged community who live in the rural area. That was our earlier focus policy. The would-be migrants benefited from this rural development effort and either remained in their own villages, or if they were landless and adventurous, as many were, they became part of the dry zone development program. More recently, during the many decades of our war against terrorism, rural-urban migration would have been reduced by the fact that many of our able-bodied rural youth opted to be recruited into the armed forces rather than face rural poverty of migrants in areas. Nevertheless, there have been from time to time in the past movements of rural folk coming into the urban areas, especially shanties. They have expanded mostly by natural increase in population and become strengthened by the growth of an informal sector. Now, more than half the population of Colombo, remember that more than half the population of Colombo live in these underserved. Now, for a strategy to deal with this, we all agree that we must do something about the slums that exist in our urban areas. Our government and many other governments have pledged to do so. Special sessions, United Nations. An executive director of the UNCHS at Habitat once advised all third world countries to attack poverty and not the poor. Get rid of slums and not the slum dwellers. Remove squatting, but not the squatters. In this well-meant guidance, what is to be our strategy? One, this is important, participatory planning. It is now well established that the old approach of slum clearance schemes, relocating squatters and slum dwellers elsewhere, usually in a suburb, does not work. Dwellings built by or at the behest of central or local government, local authorities, without the participation of the intended beneficiaries, also do not work, and we have this experience. In the urban context of a third world country, the only solutions that seem to work are in situ upgrading and or relocation. Both require a very high degree of community participation. They also require new paradigm. Planners who are trained to encourage participation by the target community. The in situ upgrading option paradigm needs very little external inputs of funding and technology, but it results in low density, low rise environment. It is most appropriate to settlements in smaller towns. It can improve the lives of a vast number of people, but it may not always be the best utilization of the valuable resource of land in a dense urban. Latter, proximate relocation may require external funding, but we have, it leads to high density medium price environments, which are much better users of this approach may require, at least in theory, a type of public-private partnership and can therefore be relatively independent of external funding. Voluntary relocation is advisable and community participation is an absolute must. There is a place for both approaches. It will be a matter of pride for Sri Lankans that both approaches are largely indigenous interventions. They are based on self-reliance. It may require further development, but its enormous potential has yet to be recognized. It must be remembered that both approaches depend on community participation. Participatory planning has to be an integral part of our strategy. Now, to talk a little bit about national urban policy. A clear case was prominently made for a national urban policy related to national development efforts. This was more than 4 decades ago, 40 years ago, but it was not. That proposed policy emphasized the need for a network of small and mid-sized towns to service, complement, and support the rural development. And improvements only in Colombo, welcome as they may be, will also activate rural-urban migration into the private. Alternative locations can be found in an attractive network of small and mid-sized towns. Such a network is anyway necessary at service centers for rural areas, which will also help us to get better returns on investments or to be made in agriculture, irrigation. A national urban policy is most urgently needed to indicate where and how as resources may be allocated for Colombo, as well as in the small and mid-sized towns. The situation has changed now. There is thankfully a new interest in development. There is also an institutional mechanism created to help find national urban to review and make modifications from major contextual changes. This relatively new mechanism, high-powered national physical planning, has to be chaired by the President. Now, in conclusion, cities without slums is not a goal that a small third world country can achieve easily. The suggested approach is essentially one that calls. We in Sri Lanka still have with us in this country, people with the necessary knowledge and skills. We also have the ability to train those others who will be needed. Strategy does not require a great deal of external funding. What it does require is a great deal of commitment, teamwork, and far-sighted political. Thank you very much for your patience. Thank you. Thanks to the OPA for letting me speak.
Thank you, Doctor, for that insightful presentation from your side. And we've got a few questions to ask from you. Doctor, in the recent past, we have seen a lot of high rises that are coming up in Colombo and suburb, particularly relocating people who were there in so-called slums. These developments obviously people would be able to go and stay there. But there is also another set of people, say, once they move into these places, they also move out and rent these properties to other people. Are there any regulatory framework that facilitates people who are getting these housings not for them not to alienate these properties to others and move out?
I don't think we have that particular type of regulation, but you know, this development is all Colombo-centric, and there is, you know, the approach that I'm taking, that we should focus more attention on the mid-size to deal with the problems of you know, urbanization. The difference in size I pointed out between Colombo and the other cities shows that there is a lot of potential in the other cities. So of course this is there, that is good, but the development that has taken place, but it is very Colombo-centric. And in fact, many of those apartments and so on are not in use. I hope that answers your question.
Of course, yes. Doctor, there was another school of thought. You know, there are a lot of people in the urban areas who are coming from these lower middle income category, or people who are really doing daily paid work. Post COVID-19, quite a lot of these people who had provided support to a lot of others who are in the working community, there has been a drop because of the risk of these people coming from highly dense areas, and the risk of people bringing in perhaps COVID-19. So now, when you continue to have these new developments and these people being put into highly dense populated, you know, apartments, it could be apartments or otherwise, how are we as a country going to face those challenges in these highly dense, you know, apartments or places where these people are accommodated?
Well, you know, the highly dense situations are really met with in the slum conditions, you know, where they have no option but to bump into each other. In the case of the other areas, yes, they are apartments, but I think they can be removed from one another in various ways, like the way we are dealing with this, wearing masks and so on. This situation is not going to go on forever, you know. I mean, we have to think into the future. You know. I mean, there will be obviously there will be impacts of the COVID. I mean, some of those impacts are good. I mean, we are going to move faster into the digital age. I mean, all that is there. But I think we should not be focusing so much along. You know, there is a huge potential for us to develop. And, if urbanization moves in such a way as to focus on Colombo, it is not very good at all.
Doctor, another question. One maybe perhaps an idea to to recommend to the government to demarcate ecological regions with rivers and as boundaries with the objective of achieving river basin based provinces in the long term. What do you think of this?
I think it's an excellent idea. You know, the demarcation of provinces in Sri Lanka has been very accidental and sometimes deliberate situation, you know, which has been imposed upon us by colonial governments and has no basis in science. Whereas the proposal to work within river basin development is an excellent idea. We should move into that as early as possible.
Right. Doctor, there is also, you know, a lot of these people who are coming from these areas, they provide assistance services to others, other professionals or other workers who are in the mainstream production or support services. Now, if we look at relocating them to relocating them out of the urban areas, that would also have an impact on those services that are being provided by these people. How do you think that would transform in the future if these people are being relocated to other areas where they would be engaging in different other types of businesses or the industries that we may choose?
Well, you know, into Colombo, I mean, you know, we have been talking before pandemic, there's a huge migration daily into Colombo and out of Colombo. I mean, several lakhs of people come into Colombo and move out every day. I mean, there's a huge loss of energy, you know, expenditure of energy, and a lot of wasted time. I mean, you know, if we can think in terms of decentralized work from the large number of those people could very easily be decentralized and work digitally with their officers in Colombo. I mean, that would, I mean, of course, they can together on certain days, but they don't have to do this 5 or 6 days a week. And there are possibilities of doing that.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for that insightful presentation and clarifications you provided. This brings us to the end of all the presentations in the technical session 1. I would like to thank all the presenters who came in and provided their contribution for today's technical sessions. And also would like to make a few housekeeping